The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., but 11-year-old Emma Henderson was already awake. She'd been lying in bed for the past 20 minutes, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, too excited to sleep. Saturday mornings meant one thing in the Henderson household: flying day. While other kids her age were sleeping in or watching cartoons, Emma would be soaring 5,000 feet above the Oklahoma plains, the world spread out beneath her like a living map. "Emma, you up, sweetie?" Her mother Sarah's voice called from downstairs, accompanied by the rich aroma of brewing coffee and frying bacon. "Been up forever," Emma shouted back, already pulling on her favorite aviation-themed t-shirt, the one with "Future Pilot" emblazoned across the front in bold letters. She grabbed her well-worn notebook, filled with sketches of cockpit instruments and flight procedures she'd copied from watching her parents. Every flight, she'd add new notes, new observations. Her father joked that she'd memorized the entire Cessna manual without ever formally reading it. Downstairs, her father John sat at the kitchen table, studying weather reports on his tablet. At 42, he'd been a flight instructor for 15 years, his face weathered from countless hours in the sun at small airstrips across the state. His logbook showed over 8,000 flight hours, each one a story, a lesson, a memory. He looked up as Emma bounded into the kitchen, her dark ponytail swinging. "Morning, co-pilot," he grinned, using his favorite nickname for her. "Weather looks perfect. Clear skies, light winds, visibility unlimited. Couldn't ask for better conditions." Sarah set down plates of scrambled eggs and bacon, her commercial pilot's uniform replaced by casual jeans and a windbreaker. Unlike John's smaller charter flights, Sarah flew regional jets for SkyWest Airlines, navigating the busy corridors between major cities. But these Saturday flights in their modest Cessna 172, registration November 723 Tango Mike, these were her favorite. No schedules, no hundreds of passengers, just her family and the open sky. "What's our flight time today, Dad?" Emma asked between bites, already mentally calculating the route she'd memorized from dozens of previous trips. "About 2.5 hours to Grandma's ranch. We'll follow Highway 287 south, skirt around the Dallas-Fort Worth airspace, then straight shot into Coleman. Should put us on the ground by 10:30, just in time for Grandma's famous brisket." Emma's eyes sparkled. Flying to Grandma's wasn't just about the destination, it was about everything in between. The way the sunrise painted the clouds gold and pink, the patchwork quilt of farmland below, the crackling radio chatter of pilots and controllers speaking their own special language, the gentle vibration of the engine that she could feel in her bones. She'd grown up with aviation in her blood, had taken her first flight at 6 weeks old, and had been begging for flying lessons since she turned 10. "Another year, Em," her father always said. 12 is the minimum age to start training, then we'll make it official." By 7:30 a.m., the family loaded into their Toyota Tacoma, heading to the small municipal airport on the edge of town. The morning air was crisp and cool, promising a hot day ahead. Emma sat in the back seat, reviewing her notes, occasionally looking up to watch the landscape roll by. She knew every turn of this route, every landmark that signaled they were close to the airport. The Guthrie Edmond Airport was a modest facility, a single paved runway, a handful of hangars, and a small terminal building that served more as a gathering place for local pilots than an actual commercial operation. Their Cessna 172, painted white with blue stripes, sat waiting in Hangar 7. Emma always thought it looked eager to fly, its nose pointed skyward even while parked. John conducted his pre-flight inspection with methodical precision, Emma shadowing his every move with her notebook open. She'd seen this routine hundreds of times, but she never tired of it. He checked the fuel, tested the control surfaces, examined the propeller for nicks or damage, verified the oil level, inspected the tires. Emma mentally checked off each item, her lips moving silently as she recited the checklist she'd memorized. "Why do we check the fuel caps twice, Dad?" she asked, even though she knew the answer. Because loose fuel caps mean fuel loss and potential engine failure. We check everything twice because in aviation, there are no small mistakes, he replied, his standard answer. What looks good on the ground keeps you safe in the air. Sarah emerged from the terminal building with their flight plan filed and weather briefing completed. We're all set. Tower says we're cleared for takeoff on runway 17 when ready. At 8:47 a.m., the Cessna's engine roared to life. Emma secured her headset, her own special set, sized for a child but professional grade, and listened as her father went through the engine run-up. Every sound, every vibration was familiar music to her ears. The radio crackled. November 723 Tango Mike, cleared for takeoff runway 17, right turn approved, maintain VFR. Cleared for takeoff, right turn, November 3 Tango Mike, her father acknowledged. The Cessna rolled forward, gaining speed. Emma felt the familiar excitement build in her chest as the wheels lifted off the pavement. The ground fell away, Oklahoma spreading out in every direction. Her father banked right, climbing steadily. The altimeter spun upward, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet. Beautiful morning for flying, Sarah said, adjusting her sunglasses. Emma pressed her face against the window, watching their hometown shrink to toy-sized proportions. At cruising altitude of 5,500 feet, the ride smoothed out. Her father set the trim, adjusted the mixture, and settled back in his seat. The drone of the engine became a steady, comforting hum. "One day, Emma, you'll be sitting right here," her father said, glancing back at her with a warm smile. "Might even be sooner than you think. You've got natural instincts." Emma beamed, hugging her notebook tight. She imagined her hands on those controls, her feet on those rudder pedals, her voice on the radio making all those official calls. It seemed like a distant dream, something magical and far away. She had no idea that in less than 30 minutes, that dream would become a nightmare, and she would be fighting for all their lives with nothing but her observations, her memory, and the desperate courage of a child who refused to let her family die. The Cessna flew on through the perfect blue sky, carrying them toward a destiny none of them could have imagined. The Cessna hummed steadily through the crystalline morning air, a tiny speck against the vast canvas of blue. Below, Oklahoma's landscape unfolded like a rumpled quilt, patches of green farmland, ribbons of highway, clusters of trees marking hidden creeks and rivers. Emma had her face pressed against the window, counting water towers, a game she'd invented years ago to pass the time. She was up to 7. "Look, there's the Turner farm," Sarah pointed out, tapping the window. "Remember when we landed there for that emergency last year, when the fuel gauge acted up?" John chuckled. Old man Turner thought we were crop dusters, nearly came out with his shotgun until he recognized the plane. He adjusted the heading slightly, keeping them aligned with Highway 287 below. "That reminds me, I need to get that fuel gauge looked at again. It's been reading a bit erratic." Emma jotted a note in her book, "Fuel gauge, trust but verify, always do visual check." Her father had taught her that instruments could fail but proper procedures never did. She glanced at the instrument panel, studying the gauges she'd memorized. Everything looked normal. Airspeed 110 knots, altitude 5,500 feet, engine RPM 2,400, oil pressure green, temperature green. The clock on the panel read 9:17 a.m. They'd been airborne for 30 minutes with about 2 hours still to go. Emma settled back into her seat, pulling out the book she'd brought, a young adult novel about a teenage pilot flying across the country. She'd read it 3 times already, but it never got old. Behind the instrument panel, invisible to all of them, something deadly was happening. A crack in the exhaust manifold, no wider than a paperclip, formed gradually over months of heating and cooling cycles, had finally grown large enough to matter. Hot exhaust gases, including carbon monoxide, were seeping into the heating system, which then pumped the contaminated air directly into the cabin. The carbon monoxide detector mounted on the sidewall near John's seat should have screamed a warning, should have flashed its red LED light, should have saved them. But its 9-volt battery had died 3 weeks earlier during a maintenance check that John had postponed twice due to weather and schedule conflicts. Next week, he'd told himself. I'll replace it next week. The detector sat silent, useless, a guardian that had fallen asleep on duty. Carbon monoxide is an insidious killer. It doesn't announce itself with smell or color. It simply replaces oxygen in the bloodstream molecule by molecule, starving the body's cells without warning. The first symptoms are subtle: a slight headache, mild fatigue, nothing alarming. Just enough to notice but easy to dismiss. "Anyone else getting a headache?" Sarah asked, rubbing her temples. "Must be the glare. I should have brought my better sunglasses." "Little bit," John admitted, blinking several times. His eyes felt heavy, like he'd stayed up too late the night before, though he'd gotten a solid 8 hours of sleep. Probably just need more coffee. He shifted in his seat, trying to shake off the growing drowsiness. Emma didn't notice anything wrong yet. At 11 years old, her smaller body mass meant the carbon monoxide would affect her more slowly, at least initially. She was absorbed in her book, occasionally glancing out the window to watch the world drift by. The concentration of carbon monoxide in the cabin was rising steadily, 200 parts per million, then 300, then 400. At these levels, symptoms progress quickly. What starts as a mild headache becomes confusion. Drowsiness deepens into disorientation. Reaction time slow. Judgment becomes impaired. "Babe, can you check the charts?" John's words came out slightly slurred. "Want to verify we're clear of the Class B airspace." His sentence took effort, like his tongue had grown thick. Sarah reached for the chart, but her movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. Yeah, we're good. She blinked hard, trying to focus on the lines that seemed to be swimming on the page. "We're at least 15 miles east of the boundary." Her head felt like it was stuffed with cotton. The sunlight streaming through the windscreen seemed too bright, painful. She closed her eyes for just a moment of relief. "Mom," Emma looked up from her book, noticing her mother's head drooping forward. "Mom, you okay?" Sarah didn't respond. Her breathing had become deep and regular, the breathing of someone falling into unconscious sleep. The chart slipped from her fingers, falling to the floor. "Mom," Emma's voice rose with concern. She unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned forward, shaking her mother's shoulder. "Mom, wake up." John turned his head slowly, as if moving through thick syrup. He saw his wife slumped in her seat and tried to make sense of it. Something was wrong, very wrong. He needed to do something. But what? His thoughts scattered like marbles on a floor, impossible to gather. "Sarah," his voice was weak, confused. He reached toward her, but his arm felt impossibly heavy. The yoke in front of him wavered in his vision, becoming 2 yokes, then merging back into one. The instrument swam before his eyes, numbers and needles that no longer made sense. Dad," Emma's scream cut through the cabin. John tried to respond, tried to tell his daughter everything would be okay, but darkness was closing in from the edges of his vision. A voice in the back of his mind, the voice of his training, his experience, was screaming warnings. Hypoxia. No, they were too low for that. Carbon monoxide. The detector would have. His last coherent thought was of Emma, his little girl, his co-pilot. Then John Henderson's eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward over the controls. The yoke pushed forward slightly under his weight. The Cessna's nose dipped. The altimeter began unwinding. 400 feet, 5,300 feet, 5,200 feet. Emma stared in absolute horror at both her parents, unconscious in their seats. The plane was descending, and she was alone. Completely, terrifyingly alone at 5,000 feet with no idea what to do. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. Her heart hammered so hard it hurt. Every instinct screamed at her to curl up, to hide, to cry for help. Instead, Emma Henderson reached for the radio. Her hand was shaking so violently she could barely press the transmit button. When she spoke, her voice cracked with terror, but the words came out clear. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is November 723 Tango Mike. My pilot father and mother aren't responding. Please, somebody help me. I'm 11 years old and I don't know how to fly." The words hung in the air, transmitted across dozens of miles. And somewhere in a darkened room filled with radar screens, Air Traffic Controller James Rodriguez heard those words and felt his blood turn to ice. James Rodriguez had been an air traffic controller for 12 years. He'd handled everything: engine failures, medical emergencies, lost pilots in bad weather, near collisions in crowded airspace. He prided himself on staying calm, on being the steady voice that guided pilots through their worst moments. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the small, terrified voice that had just cracked across his headset. "November 723 Tango Mike, Fort Worth Center, I copy your mayday." Rodriguez forced his voice to remain calm, even as his hands flew across his keyboard, flagging the aircraft on his radar screen with an emergency tag. "I've got you, sweetheart. What's your name?" "Emma." The girl's voice dissolved into sobs. "Emma Henderson. My mom and dad won't wake up. They're just sitting there and the plane is going down." Rodriguez's eyes locked onto the radar return. The aircraft was descending, 100 feet now, the altitude readout updating every sweep. His mind raced through scenarios. Medical emergency, heart attack, both parents simultaneously. That didn't make sense unless... "Emma, listen to me very carefully," Rodriguez said, typing frantically to alert his supervisor. Around him, other controllers were stopping their work, turning toward his station. "You're doing great. You called for help and that's exactly right. Now, are your parents breathing?" Emma unbuckled completely and scrambled forward, her small hands shaking as she pressed her fingers against her mother's neck like she'd seen in movies. Yes, I feel a pulse. Mom's breathing." She reached across to her father, his weight slumped against the yoke. "Dad's breathing too, but he's heavy on the controls." "Okay, Emma, that's good. That's very good." Rodriguez's supervisor, Carol Martinez, appeared at his shoulder, her face pale as she listened to the exchange. She immediately picked up a phone, beginning the emergency coordination, alerting nearby airports, scrambling emergency services, notifying FAA command. "Emma, I need you to try to pull your dad back in his seat. Can you do that?" Emma wedged herself between the two front seats, grabbing her father's shoulder with both hands. She pulled with all her 11-year-old strength. John was 6 feet tall and weighed 185 pounds. Emma weighed barely 75 pounds. She might as well have been trying to move a boulder. "I can't, he's too heavy." Fresh tears streamed down her face. "The ground is getting closer. I can see it getting closer." 4,900 feet. The plane was descending at 200 feet per minute, not a terrifying plunge, but steady and deadly. At this rate, they had less than 25 minutes before they hit the ground. "Emma, stop pulling, stop." Rodriguez kept his voice firm but gentle. "I need you to climb into the front passenger seat next to your dad. Can you do that?" Okay. Emma clambered over the center console, accidentally kicking instruments, her feet tangling in her mother's seatbelt. She finally collapsed into the passenger seat, her view suddenly filled with the instrument panel she'd studied so many times. But studying and actually being responsible for them were two completely different things. The gauges swam before her tear-blurred eyes. "I'm in the seat," she whispered. "Perfect. Now, Emma, I need you to look at the wheel in front of you. It's called the yoke. Do you see it?" "Yes." Her voice was tiny, childlike. "I'm going to have you put your hands on it. Very, very gently. Don't pull or push yet, just hold it. Can you do that?" Emma's hands, still trembling violently, reached out and gripped the yoke. The moment her fingers touched it, she felt the plane's movements transmitted through the controls, every tiny adjustment, every subtle shift. It was alive under her hands, a massive machine that she had absolutely no idea how to control. "I'm holding it," she said. "Good girl, you're doing so good, Emma." Rodriguez was simultaneously talking to her while typing commands to other controllers. Every aircraft within 50 miles of Emma's position was being vectored away, creating an invisible bubble of protected airspace around the descending Cessna. "Now, your dad is leaning on his yoke, which is making the plane go down. I need you to pull back on your yoke very gently, just a little bit, like you're picking up a baby bird. Gentle, gentle pressure." Emma pulled. The plane lurched upward, the nose rising sharply. The altimeter stopped its downward spin. "Too much, ease off, Emma. Push forward just a little." Emma pushed, overcorrecting. The nose dropped again, and her stomach rose into her throat as the plane descended faster. "Pull back, gentle." Rodriguez's calm cracked for just a second. Emma yanked back again, and the plane porpoised, up, down, like a roller coaster. She screamed, certain she was going to crash, certain these were her last moments alive. Emma, stop moving the controls, just hold them steady, freeze your hands." Emma froze, her entire body rigid with terror. The plane gradually settled into a rough approximation of level flight, though it was tilted slightly to the left, and the altitude was still slowly decreasing. 4,700 feet. Carol Martinez tapped Rodriguez's shoulder and held up her phone. "Mike Torres from Meacham is on the line, flight instructor, 25 years experience. He wants to talk to her." Rodriguez nodded. This was beyond his expertise. He was a controller, not a pilot. He could read instruments and guide aircraft, but teaching someone to actually fly, especially a terrified child, that required a different skill set entirely. "Emma, I'm going to connect you with someone who's going to help you even more than I can. His name is Mike Torres, and he's a flight instructor. He teaches people how to fly for a living. He's going to talk you through this. I'm still right here, okay? I'm not going anywhere." "Don't leave me," Emma's voice broke. "Please don't leave me alone." "I'm not leaving, I promise. Mike is just going to help both of us." There was a click, and a new voice came through, older, gravelly, with a Texas drawl that somehow sounded both authoritative and comforting. "Emma, this is Mike Torres. I hear you're having a pretty rough morning." Despite everything, despite the terror and the tears and the impossible situation, something about his understated tone made Emma bark out a single, hysterical laugh. "Yeah, pretty rough. Well, let's fix that. First thing I need to know, have you ever touched the controls before, ever sit in the pilot's seat?" "No, I mean not really. I've watched my dad like a million times. I have a notebook where I write down everything." Torres felt a surge of hope. A child who paid attention, who studied, who observed, that was something to work with. "That's good, Emma, that's real good. Now I want you to look at the instruments in front of you. There's one that looks like a little airplane with wings. It's called the attitude indicator. Do you see it?" Emma scanned the panel, her father's head lolling just inches from her shoulder, his unconscious breathing steady but wrong. Her mother slumped to her right, completely unresponsive. The weight of being utterly alone pressed down on her like a physical thing. But she found the instrument, the artificial horizon, showing a miniature plane against a blue and brown display. "I see it," she said. "Okay, that's going to be your best friend right now. That little plane needs to stay level with the horizon line. Right now, it's showing you're tilted left. I need you to turn the yoke very slightly to the right, like you're turning a car steering wheel, but much, much smaller movements." Emma turned the yoke a fraction of an inch. The plane banked right. The miniature airplane on the instrument began to level out. "That's it, perfect. You're flying, Emma, you're actually flying." And in that moment, as the Cessna steadied under her trembling hands at 4,650 feet above the Oklahoma plains, Emma Henderson realized something that terrified her more than anything else. Mike Torres was right. She was flying. and she had absolutely no idea how to land. Mike Torres stood in the flight operations office at Meacham International Airport, his phone pressed so hard against his ear it hurt. Around him, every pilot, every mechanic, every person who'd heard about the emergency had stopped working. They stood frozen, listening to the speakers that broadcast the frequency, watching a drama unfold that none of them could quite believe was real. A child, an 11-year-old child, was flying a plane with two unconscious parents, somewhere over Oklahoma, descending slowly toward Earth. "Emma, you still with me?" Torres asked, his voice deliberately calm despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I'm here." Emma's voice was steadier now, but he could hear the underlying terror. She was holding it together through sheer force of will. "The plane is kind of level, but we're still going down. The altitude thing says. It says 4,600 feet. That's okay, we're going to fix that, but first I need to understand something. Your parents, did this happen suddenly? Were they sick this morning?" Emma thought back, her mind racing. "No, they were fine. Mom said she had a headache maybe 20 minutes ago. Dad said he was tired, then they just stopped talking. And then they fell asleep, but they won't wake up." Torres' eyes widened. He looked at the FAA representative who joined him in the office, mouthing two words: carbon monoxide. The representative nodded grimly, already on another phone coordinating with emergency services. Carbon monoxide poisoning at altitude was rare but deadly. The parents might survive. They were getting exposure to thinner air at altitude, which paradoxically meant less co-accumulation. But Emma, sitting in the back initially, might have gotten less exposure. It was likely the only reason she was still conscious. "Emma, I need you to do something for me. Look around the cabin. Do you see any vents, any air controls?" Yeah, there are knobs near the ceiling." "Open them, all of them. We need fresh air flowing through the cabin." Emma reached up with one hand, keeping the other locked on the yoke. She twisted the vents open. Fresh, cold air began streaming into the cabin. Within seconds she felt it, clearer, easier to breathe. Behind her, her father made a small groaning sound. Dad, Emma twisted in her seat. "Don't let go of the controls," Torres barked. "Emma, you have to keep flying. Your dad might wake up, but right now you're the pilot. You cannot let go, understand?" Emma's hand snapped back to the yoke, tears streaming freely now. She'd heard her father's voice. He was alive. He was in there somewhere, but she couldn't help him. She could only keep the plane in the air and pray. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'm holding it." "Good. Now we need to stop your descent and get you climbing back up. Look at the instrument panel. There should be a black knob with numbers around it, probably near your right hand. It's called the throttle. Can you find it?" Emma scanned the panel, her eyes darting over dozens of switches, knobs, and gauges. There, a black knob with her father's grip marks worn into it from years of use. "I found it." "Perfect. Now that controls your engine power. Right now it's probably set around 2,400 RPM. That's another gauge that shows engine speed. I need you to push that throttle forward slowly until the RPM reads about 2,600. The engine will get louder. That's normal." Emma pushed. The engine's steady hum increased to a more aggressive roar. The plane's nose wanted to pitch up with the added power, and she struggled to hold it level. "It's pulling up. The nose is going up." "That's perfect. Let it come up a little. Remember that attitude indicator. Let the little airplane climb just above the horizon line. Small movements, Emma. Everything in flying is small, smooth movements." Emma adjusted, finding a delicate balance between the throttle, the yoke, and keeping the wings level. The altimeter's downward spiral stopped, hung at 4,550 feet for a moment, then began slowly climbing. 4,600 feet. 4,650 feet. "It's going up, it's climbing." Emma's voice carried a note of triumph mixed with disbelief. In the Fort Worth Center, James Rodriguez watched the radar return with intense focus. The rate of climb was shallow, maybe 100 feet per minute, but it was positive. The kid was doing it. Against all odds, all logic, all reasonable expectation, she was actually flying the airplane. "Emma, this is James again. You're doing incredible. How are you feeling? Any headache, any dizziness?" "I'm scared," Emma admitted, her voice small. "Really, really scared, but I don't feel sick, just scared." "Scared is okay. Scared means you're paying attention. Mike is going to keep helping you." Torres pulled up a sectional chart on his computer, plotting Emma's position based on the radar data Rodriguez was feeding him. She was currently over mostly rural farmland, which was good, fewer obstacles, less traffic. But she was heading generally south-southwest, which would eventually take her toward the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, one of the busiest airspaces in the country. They needed to turn her, guide her toward Meacham, but that was a complex maneuver for someone who'd been flying for all of 10 minutes. "Emma, I want you to tell me what you see out the window. Describe the ground." Emma looked down, her eyes scanning the landscape. Lots of fields, some green, some brown. There's a highway with cars on it, some houses, a water tower, it's blue." "Any towns, any big buildings?" "Not really, just farms mostly. Wait, I see a town in the distance, kind of small." Torres consulted his chart. Based on her flight path and time airborne, she was probably near Bridgeport, Texas. That meant she'd crossed into Texas airspace about 5 minutes ago. Meacham Airport was roughly 40 miles south-southeast. In a Cessna 172 at her current speed, that was about 22 minutes of flight time. 22 minutes might as well be 22 hours for a child who'd never flown before. "Emma, you're doing great. Now comes the hard part. We need to change your direction. I'm going to teach you how to turn the airplane." Emma's grip on the yoke tightened. "Okay. When you turn a plane, you use the yoke to bank. That means tilt the wings and your feet on the rudder pedals to coordinate the turn. Can you reach the pedals?" Emma stretched her legs. Her toes barely touched the pedals. Just barely. "That's okay. For now, we're going to do a very gentle turn using mostly the yoke. I need you to turn the yoke to the right very slowly, like you're turning a steering wheel. Just a little bit." Emma turned. The plane banked right, the world tilting outside her window. Her stomach lurched. "How far do I turn?" "Stop right there. Now hold it steady." The plane was in about a 15-degree bank, turning gradually to the right. Emma held the yoke in position, her arms trembling from the constant tension. "I'm turning. I'm actually turning." "You sure are. Now I'm going to have you hold this for about 30 seconds, then we'll level out. You're going to be pointed toward an airport called Meacham. That's where we're going to land you." The word land hit Emma like cold water. The momentary exhilaration of turning the plane evaporated. Landing. She would have to land. Bring this machine down from the sky onto a runway without killing herself and her parents. "I don't know how to land," she said, her voice breaking again. "Mike, I don't know how to land a plane." Torres closed his eyes for just a moment. 25 years of instruction, thousands of students, and this was the most important lesson of his life. A lesson delivered over a radio to a terrified child, with 3 lives hanging in the balance. "Emma, I'm not going to lie to you. Landing is the hardest part of flying. But I'm going to be with you every single second, every single moment from now until your wheels touch the ground. You listening?" "Yes." "Then trust me and trust yourself. You've been watching your dad fly your whole life. That knowledge is in you. We're going to bring it out." Behind Emma, John Henderson's eyelids fluttered. The fresh air was slowly working, clearing the carbon monoxide from his system. His brain was fighting its way back toward consciousness, but he was still minutes away from being functional. And Emma didn't have minutes to wait. She had to keep flying. Emma's world had shrunk to the small space inside the cockpit. Everything beyond the windscreen, The vast blue sky, the patchwork earth below, the endless horizon seemed unreal, like a painting she was trapped inside. The only real things were the yoke in her hands, Mike Tor's voice in her headset, and the steady, terrifying rhythm of her own heartbeat. "Okay, Emma, level out now. Turn the yoke back to center gently." Emma brought the wings level. The plane steadied on its new heading, pointed southeast toward an airport she'd never seen, couldn't imagine reaching. Her arms ached from maintaining constant pressure on the controls. She'd been flying for nearly 40 minutes now, 40 minutes that felt like 40 hours. "Good, now look at your compass. It's the round instrument with the letters N, E, S, W. What heading are you on?" Emma squinted at the compass, watching it swing and settle. 140. "Perfect. Try to keep it right around 140. That'll take you straight to Meacham. We've got about 15 miles to go." 15 miles. In a car, that would be 15 minutes. In this airplane, at 110 knots, it would take about 8 minutes. 8 minutes until she had to attempt the impossible. On the ground at Meacham International Airport, the scene was controlled chaos. Emergency vehicles lined the taxiways, fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. News helicopters circled at a safe distance, their cameras trained on the runway. The story had broken across local television stations. Child flying plane after parents lose consciousness. Within minutes, it had gone national. In the airport's operations center, Mike Tors sat surrounded by charts, checklists, and half a dozen aviation professionals who'd rushed to help. But ultimately, it came down to him and his voice. He was the bridge between Emma and survival. "Emma, talk to me. How are your parents doing?" Emma glanced at her father. His color looked better, less gray. His breathing was deeper, more normal. She'd heard him groan twice more in the past few minutes. "Dad's moving a little bit. He groaned, but he's not awake." "That's a good sign. The fresh air is helping. Your mom?" "Still sleeping." Tors made a decision. "Emma, I need you to try something. Keep one hand on the yoke, don't let go, but reach over with your other hand and shake your dad's shoulder. Hard, try to wake him up." Emma stretched across, maintaining pressure on the yoke with her left hand while shaking her father's shoulder with her right. "Dad, wake up, please wake up." John's eyes flickered behind his lids. His hand twitched. Somewhere in the fog of his brain, he heard his daughter's voice, distant, desperate. He tried to swim toward it, but the darkness was thick, heavy. "Daddy, I'm flying. I don't know how to land. I need you." John's eyes cracked open just barely. The world was blurry, spinning. He saw instruments, saw sky, felt vibration. Flying, they were flying. Emma was. Emma was in the pilot's seat. He whispered, his voice barely audible. "Dad, you're awake." Emma sobbed with relief. Can't move." John's words were slurred, his coordination shot. He tried to reach for the controls, but his arms felt like they were made of lead. His head lolled against the seat. "Emma, this is Mike. Can your dad fly?" Emma looked at her father, eyes half open, barely conscious, utterly incapable of piloting. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, he can't. He can barely talk." Tors felt his stomach sink but kept his voice steady. "Okay, that's okay. Then it's still you and me, kiddo. Your dad's going to be fine, but right now, you're still the pilot in command." Emma wanted to scream, wanted to throw the yoke away, curl into a ball, make this nightmare end. But her father's half-conscious eyes were on her now, and in them she saw something: pride, trust. He couldn't help her, but he believed she could do this. She sucked in a shaky breath and tightened her grip on the controls. "Tell me what to do." For the next 5 minutes, Tors walked Emma through the basics of flight control. How to trim the airplane to reduce the pressure on the yoke. How to make small corrections instead of large ones. How to scan the instruments in a pattern, airspeed, altitude, heading, attitude, over and over again. Emma absorbed it all, her fear transforming into fierce concentration. She stopped thinking about the impossibility of what she was doing and focused on each individual task. Keep the wings level. Maintain altitude. Hold the heading. It was like a video game, except the consequences were real. Emma, I can see you on radar now. You're about 8 miles out from the airport. I need you to start descending, nice and slow. Pull the throttle back to about 2,200 RPM. Emma's hand found the throttle and eased it back. The engine noise decreased. The nose wanted to drop. Pull back a little on the yoke to keep the nose up. We want to descend at 300 feet per minute. Watch the vertical speed indicator. It's the gauge with up and down arrows. Emma found the instrument. The needle was showing descent. Too much, 500 feet per minute. Add a little power back, not too much. She pushed the throttle forward slightly. The descent rate decreased. 400 feet per minute, 350. She was constantly adjusting, hunting for that perfect balance. You're doing great. Keep it coming down. We're going to level off at 1,800 feet for the traffic pattern. Behind Emma, John was fighting his way back to consciousness with everything he had. The fresh air had cleared enough of the carbon monoxide from his system that his brain was beginning to function again, though his body still wouldn't cooperate. He could see his daughter flying, actually flying, the plane, and his heart was simultaneously bursting with pride and breaking with terror. "Good girl," he mumbled, so proud of you." Emma heard him and felt a surge of strength. Her father, her hero, her teacher, was proud of her. Even in his semi-conscious state, even barely functional, he believed in her. The altitude unwound, 3,000 feet, 2,500 feet, 2,000 feet. Level off at 1,800, Emma. Add power, pull back on the yoke. Emma did, and the plane leveled out. She was panting from the exertion, from the stress, but she'd done it. She descended the plane and leveled off. Okay, now look out your window. About 2 o'clock, that means right front, you should see the airport. Emma strained to look. There, a cluster of buildings, a long gray strip of runway, and what seemed like hundreds of flashing lights surrounding it. I see it, I see the airport. That's Meacham. That's where you're going to land. Emma, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The next 10 minutes are going to be the hardest of your life. Landing a plane is difficult even for experienced pilots, but you've done everything else right. You can do this too. Emma stared at the runway in the distance. It looked impossibly small, impossibly narrow. How was she supposed to put this plane down on that tiny strip of concrete without crashing? I'm scared, Mike. I know you are, but here's what I want you to remember. You're already doing the impossible. You've been flying for almost an hour. You've climbed, you've descended, you've turned. You've done all of that with zero training. Landing is just one more thing, and I'm going to be in your ear the entire time, every second. Emma took a deep breath. Across the frequency, every air traffic controller in Fort Worth Center was listening. Every pilot within range was listening. In operations centers and flight schools across the country, people had stopped what they were doing to listen to this drama unfold. And in living rooms and offices and cars across America, people who'd heard the breaking news were pulling over, turning up their radios, gathering around television screens to watch the impossible, an 11-year-old girl attempting to land an airplane. Emma Henderson didn't know about any of that. She didn't know she had an audience of millions. She only knew that the runway was getting closer, her father was counting on her, and Mike Torres was still talking in her ear. Okay, Emma, here we go. I'm going to walk you through entering the traffic pattern. Follow my instructions exactly. And Emma, her hands locked on the yoke, her heart hammering in her chest, whispered one word. Ready? Runway at Meacham International Airport stretched 7,502 feet, more than enough for a Cessna 172 under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. Mike Torres stared at the radar screen showing Emma's position, doing calculations in his head. Wind was calm, visibility unlimited, ceiling and temperature perfect. Everything was in their favor, except for the one thing that mattered most. The pilot had 11 years of life experience and 0 hours of flight training. Emma, you're going to enter what's called a left traffic pattern. That means you're going to fly alongside the runway, then make a series of left turns until you're lined up straight with the runway. Think of it like making a big rectangle in the sky. Emma could see the airport more clearly now. Emergency vehicles were everywhere, their lights creating a border of red and blue along the taxiways. She could even see people standing outside, looking up at her. The weight of all those watching eyes made her stomach clench. "Okay," she said, though her voice trembled. "What do I do first?" "Right now, you're approaching from the northeast. I need you to turn left, heading about 100 degrees. That'll put you on what we call the downwind leg. You'll be flying parallel to the runway, but going the opposite direction." Emma turned the yoke left, watching the compass swing. The plane banked, and she held it steady until the heading showed 100. She leveled the wings. "I'm at 100. Perfect. Now look to your left. You should be able to see the runway beside you." Emma craned her neck. There it was, the long gray strip, perpendicular to her path, emergency vehicles lining its edges like spectators at a parade. Except this parade could end in disaster. Torres continued, his voice measured and calm. "You're going to fly this heading until the runway is about 45 degrees behind you. That means when you look back over your left shoulder, it's kind of behind your wing. Then we'll turn left again." Emma flew, counting seconds in her head, trying to judge the angle. Her father had explained traffic patterns to her dozens of times, drawing them on napkins at restaurants, using his hands to demonstrate the turns. She'd never imagined she'd be flying one herself. Behind her, John was becoming more lucid by the minute. He could see what was happening, his daughter flying the pattern, preparing to land. Every instinct screamed at him to take over, but his body still wouldn't obey. His hands were too weak to grip the controls. His feet couldn't work the rudder pedals. He was a prisoner in his own body, forced to watch his little girl attempt something that seasoned pilots sometimes got wrong. "Baby," he croaked, "you can do this, remember, smooth, everything smooth." "I know, Daddy, I remember." Emma's voice was stronger now, fortified by her father's words even in his weakened state. "Okay, Emma, turn left now. Turn to heading 10. This is called the base leg." Emma banked left again, her movements smoother now, more confident. The plane turned, and suddenly the runway was in front of her, but off to the left at an angle. "Good, now I need you to start descending again. Pull the throttle back to 1,800 RPM. Let the nose come down." Emma reduced power. The airplane began to sink. The ground rushed up faster than she expected, and fear spiked through her chest. "How far down do I go?" "I want you at 1,000 feet. Watch the altimeter. You're at 1,600 now, 1,500. That's good, nice and steady." The plane descended, and Emma could see individual buildings now, cars in parking lots, people standing and watching. The world was becoming concrete and real, no longer an abstract patchwork far below. "Level off at 1,000 feet, Emma. Add power back to about 2,000 RPM. She did, catching the altitude just as the altimeter wound down through 1,050 feet. The plane leveled, bouncing slightly in some light turbulence. "Okay, this is the base leg. In a minute I'm going to have you turn left one more time. That will line you up with the runway. That's called the final approach. Once you make that turn, it's a straight shot to the runway. No more turns." Emma's breathing was shallow, rapid. This was it. The moment everything had been building toward. She could see the runway clearly now, could see the numbers painted on it, 17/35, marking the directions. She would be landing on runway 17. "Mike, I don't know if I can do this." Torres leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, speaking directly into the microphone as if he could project himself through the radio and into that cockpit with her. "Emma, listen to me. 3 months ago, I had a 50-year-old businessman in my plane who was learning to fly. Brilliant guy, ran a whole company, made million-dollar decisions every day. And you know what? His first landing attempt, he bounced that plane 4 times and nearly put us in the grass. You're already better than he was." Despite her terror, Emma almost laughed. "Really? Really? You've got good instincts. You've been watching and learning your whole life. Your hands know what to do, even if your brain doesn't think they do. Now I need you to turn left one more time. Turn to heading 170. That'll line you up with the runway." Emma turned. The plane banked left, and when she rolled out, the runway was straight ahead, a gray strip stretching toward her like a path to salvation or doom. "I see it, I'm lined up." "Beautiful. Now, Emma, this is important. You're high, about 1,000 feet, and you need to descend all the way to the ground. But we're going to do it slowly, gradually. Pull the throttle back to about 1,500 RPM. The engine quieted to a gentle purr. The nose wanted to drop sharply, and Emma pulled back on the yoke to keep it from diving. "Don't pull back too much. Let the nose come down a little. We want to descend at about 400 feet per minute." Emma adjusted, finding that delicate balance again. The plane descended, and the runway grew larger in the windscreen. Her hands were slick with sweat on the yoke. "Airspeed, Emma, check your airspeed. What does it say?" Emma's eyes flicked to the gauge. 75. "Too slow, add a little power. We want 70 knots for landing, but you're only at 65. We need more speed or the plane will stall." "What does stall mean?" "Just add power. Push the throttle forward a little." Emma pushed. The engine noise increased, and the airspeed climbed to 70 knots. "Good, hold it right there." The runway filled her vision now. She was at 500 feet, then 400, descending steadily. Every second brought her closer. She could see the markings on the pavement, could see people standing beside fire trucks, could see her future rushing toward her at 70 knots. John Henderson, watching from his semi-conscious state, began to cry. His daughter, his beautiful, brave daughter, was about to attempt a landing that even he found challenging after thousands of hours. If she misjudged the height, came in too fast, too slow, at the wrong angle, touched down on the nose wheel first instead of the main gear. He couldn't think about it. He just whispered prayers and encouragement, his voice too weak for Emma to hear clearly. "You're at 200 feet, Emma. Start pulling the throttle all the way back to idle. We're almost there." Emma pulled. The engine went quiet except for the propeller windmilling. The plane was gliding now, committed to landing, no chance to go around and try again. "Mike, it's coming up so fast." "I know, that's normal. At about 10 feet, I'm going to tell you to flare. That means pull back on the yoke, gentle but firm. It'll make the nose come up and slow you down for touchdown. But not yet. Not yet." 100 feet, 50 feet. The runway's surface was rushing toward her, every crack in the pavement visible. "Get ready." 20 feet. "Flare now, pull back." Emma pulled. Emma pulled back on the yoke with both hands, her entire body straining against the controls. The Cessna's nose lifted skyward, the angle of attack increasing as the plane transitioned from powered flight to that critical moment between sky and earth. For a fraction of a second, the aircraft seemed to hang suspended in the air, defying gravity through sheer forward momentum. Then physics reasserted itself. The main landing gear struck the runway with a thunderous bang that reverberated through the entire airframe. Emma's teeth clacked together. Her body compressed against the seatbelt. But she'd pulled back too hard. The plane bounced, launching back into the air like a stone skipping across water. "I hit it, ITBOUNCED," Emma screamed, pure panic in her voice. "It's okay, keep the nose up. Let it settle," Mike Torres shouted into his microphone, his carefully maintained calm finally cracking. Around him, every person in the operations center gripped their chairs, their desks, each other, anything to channel the helpless tension of watching but being unable to act. The Cessna climbed 20 feet back into the air, still traveling at 60 knots down the runway. Emma's instinct was to push the yoke forward to get back on the ground, but some deeper knowledge, some memory of her father's teachings, held her back. "Don't push forward, keep the yoke where it is," Torres commanded. The plane descended again. Emma's world narrowed to a tunnel of pure sensation, the rumble of the engine, the whistle of wind, the sight of gray concrete filling her windscreen, the yoke vibrating in her hands. Wham! The wheels hit again, harder this time. The right main gear touched a fraction of a second before the left, causing the plane to swerve right. Emma felt the sickening sensation of losing directional control. "Rudder, use your feet, left pedal," Tor's voice cut through her terror. Emma stomped on the left pedal with both feet, using all her 11-year-old weight. The plane's nose swung back toward the center line, but she'd overcorrected. Now they were veering left. "Right pedal, lighter this time." The plane bounced a third time, but lower now, less than 5 feet. Emma could see sparks where metal scraped pavement. The landing gear screamed in protest, stressed beyond its design limits but somehow holding together. "The brakes, step on the top of the pedals," Torres shouted. Emma's feet were barely long enough to reach the pedals at all, let alone the tops where the brakes were located. She stretched, pointing her toes, and pressed down hard. Too hard. The brakes locked. The tires shrieked, leaving black rubber streaks across the runway. The sudden deceleration threw Emma forward against her seatbelt. Her father, still barely conscious, slumped harder against his own restraints. Her mother's head lolled forward. The Cessna shuddered violently, the nose dipping down as weight transferred forward. For a horrible moment, Torres thought the plane might nose over, might flip onto its back at 40 knots, but the main gear held. The tail came back down with a bang. "Ease off the brakes, not so hard." Emma released pressure and the plane rolled forward again, decelerating more gradually now. The end of the runway was approaching. 500 feet remaining, then 1,000 feet, then 500. Turn right toward the taxiway. Use the rudder pedals." Emma pressed the right pedal, and miraculously, mercifully, the plane turned. It wasn't graceful. The turn was too sharp, the inside wing dipping low enough that the tip almost scraped the ground. But it turned off the active runway onto the taxiway. Stop now." Emma stood on both brake pedals with her full body weight. The plane lurched to a halt, the engine still running, the propeller still spinning. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence on the frequency. Then chaos erupted. Emergency vehicles swarmed the airplane from every direction. Fire trucks, ambulances, police cars converged on the small Cessna that sat askew on the taxiway, smoke rising from its tortured brakes, fuel dripping from overflow vents. But it was on the ground, intact, upright. Tor's voice came through, thick with emotion. Emma, you did it. You're on the ground. You landed the plane." Emma sat frozen in the pilot's seat, her hands still locked in a death grip on the yoke, her feet still pressed hard on the brakes. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what had just happened. Her entire body shook violently, adrenaline and terror and relief all colliding in a tsunami of emotion. The first firefighter to reach the plane wrenched open the pilot's door. He was a 20-year veteran named Marcus Webb, who'd seen every kind of emergency, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of a small girl in the pilot's seat, tears streaming down her face, her knuckles white from gripping the controls. "Honey, you can let go now," he said gently. "You're safe." Emma tried to release the yoke, but her hands wouldn't obey. The muscles had locked, cramped from nearly an hour of constant tension. Webb had to physically pry her fingers open, one by one. The moment her hands came free, Emma collapsed. Webb caught her, lifting her small body out of the cockpit. Her legs couldn't support her weight. They folded like paper the instant her feet touched the ground. She would have fallen if he hadn't been holding her. "My parents," she gasped, finding her voice. "Please help my parents." Paramedics were already climbing into the plane, extracting John and Sarah Henderson with practiced efficiency. Oxygen masks went on first, then cervical collars as a precaution, then they were being transferred to stretchers. Both were breathing, both had strong pulses, both were starting to regain consciousness as the fresh air and pure oxygen cleared the carbon monoxide from their systems. Emma tried to go to them, but her legs still wouldn't work. Webb carried her to an ambulance, setting her gently on the back bumper. Another paramedic checked her vitals, shined a light in her eyes, asked her questions she could barely hear over the ringing in her ears. "She's in shock," the paramedic said. "Vitals are stable, but she needs to be checked out at the hospital." On the frequency, the celebration had begun. Controllers were cheering, breaking every protocol about professional radio procedure. Pilots who'd been holding at various positions around the airport were calling in their congratulations. The Fort Worth Center frequency, normally strictly business, had devolved into what sounded like a party line. James Rodriguez sat at his console, his head in his hands, tears running down his face. In 12 years as a controller, he'd saved lives before, guided pilots through weather, talked them away from collisions, coordinated emergency responses. But this was different. This was a child who shouldn't have been able to do what she'd just done. Carol Martinez put her hand on his shoulder. "You saved them, James. You and Mike. You saved that whole family." Rodriguez shook his head. "Emma saved them. We just gave her permission to believe she could." Back at the runway, news helicopters were landing. Reporters were being held back by police, but they could see enough. Cameras captured the battered Cessna, the emergency vehicles, the small girl being wrapped in a blanket and checked by paramedics while her parents were loaded into ambulances. Within minutes, the footage was airing on every news network. Within an hour, it was global. The story that seemed impossible, that defied belief, that made people stop and stare at their screens in wonder. An 11-year-old girl had landed an airplane after her pilot parents lost consciousness. She had fought her way through terror and done the impossible, and she had survived. Emma sat in the ambulance, wrapped in her blanket, watching them load her father into another ambulance. His eyes opened, found hers across the distance, and he mouthed 2 words. "My hero." Then the doors closed and the ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing. Emma Henderson, 11 years old, 4 foot 9 inches tall, 75 pounds soaking wet, had just entered the history books, but all she could think about was whether her parents would be okay. She didn't yet know that her nightmare was over. And her life would never be the same again. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and fear. Emma sat in a wheelchair, hospital policy, even though she'd walked the plane to a stop, her legs still trembling 12 hours after the landing. The blanket from the ambulance was still wrapped around her shoulders. She hadn't let anyone take it away. Through the window of the hyperbaric chamber, she could see her parents lying side by side, oxygen masks covering their faces, looking small and vulnerable in their hospital gowns. The chamber was pressurized, forcing pure oxygen into their bloodstreams, purging the carbon monoxide that had nearly killed them all. Dr. Rachel Martinez knelt beside Emma's wheelchair. "They're going to be fine," she said softly. "The carbon monoxide levels were dangerous, but we caught it in time. Thanks to you, the fresh air you let into the cabin prevented worse damage. You saved their lives, Emma." Emma nodded numbly. People kept telling her she was a hero, but she didn't feel like one. She felt exhausted, hollowed out, like all her emotions had been burned away in that cockpit at 5,000 feet. "When can I see them?" "Another hour in the chamber, then we'll move them to regular rooms. You can talk to them then." That first night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the runway rushing up at her, felt the violent impact of the wheels hitting concrete, heard her own screaming voice on the radio. She'd wake up gasping, certain she was falling from the sky. The nurses found her at 3 a.m., sitting in the hallway outside her parents' rooms, staring at nothing. By morning, the hospital was under siege. News vans filled the parking lot. Reporters clamored for interviews. The FAA wanted statements. The governor wanted to meet her. The mayor was planning a ceremony. Everyone wanted a piece of the miracle girl who'd landed the plane. Emma's grandmother, who'd been expecting them for barbecue and instead got a frantic phone call about a crash landing, arrived and became Emma's fierce protector. "Nobody talks to her," Margaret Henderson declared to the hospital administrator. "Not until her parents are awake and can decide." John Henderson opened his eyes fully 48 hours after the landing. His first word was Emma. She was at his bedside in seconds, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, you're awake." John pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. He was crying too, his body shaking with sobs. "You flew the plane," he whispered. "Baby girl, you flew the plane. I was conscious enough to see some of it. You were magnificent." "I was so scared." Being scared and doing it anyway, that's what courage is. He pulled back to look at her face. "Emma, what you did. Professional pilots with thousands of hours would have panicked, but you kept your head. You listened. You learned. You survived." Sarah woke an hour later and the reunion was equally tearful. "My brave girl," she kept saying over and over. "My impossibly brave girl." The FAA investigation took 3 weeks. They examined every inch of the Cessna, found the cracked exhaust manifold, the dead battery and the carbon monoxide detector, the stressed landing gear that had somehow held together through Emma's bouncing touchdown. They interviewed Emma for hours, going through every moment of the flight. She answered their questions in a monotone, reliving the nightmare she was trying desperately to forget. The findings led to new regulations: mandatory carbon monoxide detector checks before every flight, required battery replacement schedules, stricter maintenance protocols for exhaust systems. John Henderson's near miss would save countless future lives. But Emma wasn't thinking about regulations or policy changes. She was thinking about how she couldn't close her eyes without seeing that runway, how the sound of airplanes overhead made her heart race, how the thought of ever setting foot in a cockpit again made her want to vomit. The recognition came anyway. The governor of Texas presented her with the Medal of Valor at a ceremony she barely remembered attending. The FAA gave her the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award, extraordinarily rare for someone who wasn't even a licensed pilot. Schools invited her to speak. News magazines wanted her story. Hollywood producers called about movie rights. Emma smiled for the cameras and said the right things, but inside she was breaking. 6 months after the landing, she was in therapy twice a week. Dr. Sarah Kim specialized in trauma, and she was the first person who didn't call Emma a hero. "What you experienced was traumatic," Dr. Kim said during their 5th session. "Everyone keeps focusing on what you accomplished, but nobody's acknowledging what it cost you. The fear, the responsibility, the burden of keeping your parents alive when you were just a child who wanted them to wake up and take care of you." Emma broke down then, really broke down, crying for the first time since the hospital. All the terror she'd suppressed, all the nights of nightmares, all the anxiety that made her jump at sudden noises, it poured out. "I don't want to be brave anymore," she sobbed. "I just want to be normal." "Then let's work on getting you there." It took 8 months of therapy before Emma could look at pictures of the Cessna without her hands shaking. 10 months before she could visit an airport without a panic attack. A year before her father gently suggested they go for a drive to see the plane, now fully repaired and inspected, sitting in its hangar. Emma stood at the hangar door staring at November 723 Tango Mike. It looked so small, so innocent. How had this little machine nearly killed them? How had she flown it? "Want to sit in it?" her father asked. "Just sit, no engine, no pressure." Emma's therapist had suggested this, graduated exposure, confronting the source of trauma in a safe, controlled way. She took a deep breath and nodded. They climbed into the cockpit together. Emma sat in the pilot's seat, her hands resting on the yoke. The memories flooded back, but this time, mixed with the terror, was something else. Pride. She had done this. She had saved her family. "I want to learn to fly," she said suddenly. "For real this time." John looked at her in surprise. "Emma, you don't have to." "I know, but I want to because what happened? It doesn't get to be the end of my story. It doesn't get to be the thing that ruins flying for me forever." She turned to face him. "You taught me that staying calm saves lives, that knowing what to do matters. I want to know more. I want to make sure that if anything like this ever happens again to me or anyone else, I can handle it." On Emma's 12th birthday, the legal age to begin flight training, she logged her first official lesson. Her instructor was Mike Torres, who'd flown in from Fort Worth specifically for this moment. They spent the first hour on the ground just talking. Then they taxied to the runway. "You ready?" Torres asked. Emma's hands were steady on the controls. "Ready." They took off into a crystal-clear sky, and for the first time since the emergency, Emma felt something other than fear. She felt joy. The pure, uncomplicated joy of flight that had drawn her to aviation in the first place. She flew for 30 minutes, practicing turns and climbs and descents, all the things she'd done in terror, now being learned properly, safely, with an instructor beside her. When they landed smoothly, gently, nothing like her first attempt, Torres turned to her with tears in his eyes. "You're going to be an exceptional pilot, Emma Henderson." 5 years later, at 17, Emma earned her private pilot's license. She was the youngest licensed pilot in Oklahoma history. At 18, she enrolled in the aviation program at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. At 22, she earned her commercial license and flight instructor certificate. Now, at 25, Emma Henderson teaches people to fly. Her office wall holds her licenses and certificates, but pride of place goes to a framed radio transcript, her Mayday call from that June morning when she was 11 years old. She keeps it there not as a trophy, but as a reminder. When students get frustrated during difficult maneuvers, when they doubt their abilities, when they wonder if they have what it takes to be pilots, Emma tells them her story. Not the sanitized, heroic version from news reports, but the real one. The terror, the mistakes, the bouncing landing that nearly went catastrophically wrong. "I bounced that plane 3 times, she tells them. "I overcorrected every turn. I was crying so hard I could barely see the instruments, and I landed it anyway because giving up wasn't an option." Then she looks them in the eye and says the words Mike Torres once said to her. "You're already better than you think you are. Trust your training, trust yourself, and never ever give up." Emma still flies November 723 Tango Mike sometimes. Her parents gifted it to her on her 21st birthday. When she climbs into that cockpit, she thinks about the girl she was, terrified and alone, doing the impossible because there was no alternative. That girl taught her that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is your hands shaking on the controls, your voice breaking on the radio, your heart hammering in your chest, and doing what needs to be done anyway. Emma Henderson touched the sky when she was 11 years old, and though she fell, she learned to fly again. And that made all the difference. The end.